As many of you will have noticed, I like to mess about with various bits of hardware and software on this channel, and when I'm testing something like this, I need to install a whole bunch of different operating systems. Now, I could just have a drawer full of installation media, but let's be honest, that would suck. Instead, I have this. This one USB drive can install any operating system I need, or boot me into various bare metal utilities. Stick around and I'll show you how to make your own. To get started, you're going to need the following. One regular USB drive. What size? Well, it depends how many installers and utilities you want to put on it. You'll need the installers or image files for your operating systems and bootable utilities. A DVD image ISO file will do, as will an IMG file, a Windows Vim image, EFI, or a Windows Hyper-V virtual disk, that's a VHD or VHDX. In most cases, you can go to the vendor's website, download a DVD image and use that. They're usually free to download, even from Microsoft. Shout in the comments if you're struggling to find something and someone might be able to help you out with a link. The last thing you'll need is a little tool called Ventoy. This is also free. In fact, it's open source, so free as in beer and free as in speech. Go to ventoy.net, click Downloads and choose the one that matches your operating system. This is the operating system you're going to use to prepare the drive. I'm going to use Windows to set things up, so I'll download the Windows version even though I'll use the drive to boot Linux. At the time of recording, it doesn't actually matter which link you click here because they all just take you to GitHub. So scroll down to the Assets section under the latest release and click on the appropriate link for your operating system to get the actual download. Extract the zip file you downloaded, and the file you want to run is Ventoy to disk. Make sure your USB drive is plugged in and you should be able to select it from the drop-down. Be careful at this point. Ventoy is going to format your USB drive, destroying any files on it. Make sure you've selected the correct drive and that there's nothing on it you want to keep. Click Install to install Ventoy onto your drive. It doesn't take very long. Once it's finished, you'll have an empty USB drive called Ventoy showing up. If you look closely at the disk partitioning, you'll see it has a second partition called Ventoy EFI. When you reinsert the drive later on, you might find that appears as an additional drive. If it happens, you can just ignore it. Don't mess about with the Ventoy EFI partition, that's where Ventoy itself is installed. If you want to update to a newer version of Ventoy in the future, just download the newer version, run Ventoy to disk, and use the update button. That will update the version of Ventoy installed in your Ventoy EFI partition without affecting any of your files in the drive. At this point, the drive acts like any other USB drive and we can use it as such. The magic happens when we add bootable images to it. I'll download a fresh copy of Ubuntu Desktop and Windows 11 as an example. In both cases, I'm downloading an ISO file. To add these to Ventoy, all I need to do is drag and drop them onto the USB drive, just like any regular file. Now, if I reboot my computer and choose to boot from the USB drive, Ventoy will load and present me with a list of images to boot from. In this case, we've got our Ubuntu and Windows ISOs. If you don't know how to boot from a USB drive, refer to computer or motherboard's manual. There's usually a button you need to press as it starts up, or you can change the boot order in your BIOS. If you're using Windows, you can hold the Shift key and restart. This will present you with an options screen. Choose Use a device, then choose the option that represents your USB drive. This may say something like USB storage, removable storage, or the device model. Then you'll reboot into Ventoy. From the Ventoy menu, I can see the images copied to the drive, and I can boot into the Windows 11 setup by selecting the image I downloaded from Microsoft. One snag you might run into is Secure Boot. Ventoy supports Secure Boot, but it isn't trusted by default. This doesn't mean Ventoy isn't trustworthy, it just means your computer doesn't know it's trustworthy yet. When your computer starts and has Secure Boot enabled, it looks for a signature from a trusted party. Most computers and motherboards ship pre-configured to trust Microsoft, because most computers come with Windows installed. In fact, a lot of Linux distros get their boot code signed by Microsoft because it's the easiest way to avoid end users having to deal with this screen. It is fairly easy to deal with though. Hit OK, then press any key to manage keys. And at the next screen, select Enroll key from disk. Select Ventoy EFI, then enroll this key in mockmanager.sir. Continue, and yes, then reboot. If this seems confusing, what you've just done is you've added Ventoy to the list of trusted parties that your computer knows about. Ventoy's certificate is now stored alongside Microsoft's, so when your computer sees boot code signed by Ventoy, it will allow it to run and you should have no further problems with it. Ventoy is perfectly usable as it stands. You can add and remove images from it by dragging and dropping the files, and you can even use it as a regular USB drive to transfer files between computers. But the eagle-eyed among you will have noticed that my version looked a little bit different. Let me show you how to customize it. You can write a config file by hand, it uses JSON, but the easiest option is to run the Ventoy plugs-on application included in the download. Select your drive, click Start, and it will open a web page. There is a ton of customization available. One of the options I changed was this secondary boot menu. When I selected the Windows image with Ventoy at defaults, there was a second menu with additional boot options. If you don't care about that, you can set this option to 0 for don't display and it'll be skipped. Another more obvious thing I changed was the visual theme from the theme plugin section of the menu. Ventoy uses Grub as a bootloader, which is skinnable. Click here to get the documentation page, and there's a link right here to a list of pre-made themes for Grub. If I look at the distro Grub themes, for example, we can see a different style with variations for different operating system distributions. There's one for Ventoy, although you can't actually use any as the difference is just the graphic displayed at the top. I'll download the Ventoy one though. If, like me, you're using Windows, this tar file might throw you. Long story short, treat it like a zip file. You'll need something to extract it as Windows won't handle it by default. I recommend 7-zip because it's free, it's open source where licensing allows, and it can handle a ton of different types of archive. But if you don't want to use a third-party tool, you can extract it natively in Windows using the command line. The command is tar-xf and the path to the file to extract it in the current directory. If you go back to your Ventoy drive, you'll see there's now a folder called Ventoy and a config file in there which has been created to save for customizations. I'll drag the folder containing my extracted Grub theme into here and rename it to my theme just so it's a bit more obvious what it is. Back in the configuration tool, from the theme plugin section I'll click Add and give it the path to my theme.txt file. In my case that's f, Ventoy, my theme and theme.txt. You can change the default screen resolution here as well if you prefer it to be a bit more high res. One other difference you might have spotted in my version was it gave a list of operating systems by name rather than listing file names. That was done using the menu alias plugin. From here you can override the menu text for specific files to have it display something a bit more friendly. Let me add aliases for our Windows and Ubuntu images. Okay, I'll stop and exit the plugs on tool, and if I reboot now, you'll see Ventoy is using the theme we downloaded and the menu items have been replaced by our aliases. If I select Ubuntu, it's skipping the second stage menu and booting me straight into Ubuntu, which I can run live from USB or installed on my hard drive. Have a play around with the different options and have fun building your own ultimate USB drive, loaded with your favourite installers, live boot images or recovery utilities. Back when I did more in-the-field computer repair sort of work, I kept a drive like this in my car at all times, with a bunch of recovery utilities and a live Linux install on it. I cannot tell you how many times that drive saved someone's bacon. Back then there was no Ventoy, and building something like this manually was an exercise in frustration to try and get all of the tools to play nicely together with Grub. The fact that you can just drag and drop DVD and boot images straight onto a drive now, and you're done, I would have happily paid money for this back in the day, and now you can get it for free. To see more free tools, click on this video here, and I'll introduce you to a few more little lifesavers that no tech or sysadmin should be without. Now, go click that like button, and I'll see you in the next video.